So who are you?
I'm Akram Khan. I'm a choreographer, but primarily I'm a dancer, and now slowly shifted into the role of a choreographer over the last 15 years.
You've worked with many different types of storytellers, from Juliette Binoche to Anish Kapoor to Hanif Qureshi, people who use lots of different mediums, from sculpture through to acting, to tell stories. Do you have any ambitions to move into other fields?
I'm very aware of my own field and how many years and hours and sweat and blood it takes to just be able to know a little bit about the form that one does. So I'm very aware of that. So to enter other areas fascinates me, but I have to find a symmetry or a reason other than it's different. Because for me, some of the experiences I have had with working with other fields is that sometimes it is undercooked. It ends up being undercooked, or even though it's an experiment, it ends up being more of an experiment rather than something that is developed into something that I can be proud of.
Could you give us a quick summary of your career to date, the big ideas that you've worked on?
I think really a lot of my ideas is inspired by mythology, particularly Indian mythology, but inspired by mythologies. You couldn't get more bigger than that in terms of epicness, epic storytelling. But also a big theme for me is about human. Part of my journey has been about identity and about understanding that coming to terms with my identity and what it means in the place that I live. And I think it's we're all somehow foreigners. We're all immigrants. Everybody right down back to history, all the way back, there are no such thing as original English people. So I'm fascinated by journeys between borders, through borders, between languages, between cultures, between religions. I'm fascinated by those walls that are put up and those walls that we try to break through.
You worked on the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games, the 2012 Olympic Games, with Danny Boyle. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was an extraordinary experience because, as you know, it's you get it wrong, a lot of people are going to see it. You get it right, and a lot of people will see it. And there's a very fine line between getting it right and wrong, because on the day something could go wrong technically, or it was an extraordinary experience because I think predominantly because of Danny. Really, he gave me a lot of freedom as the creator of this small section that I did, and the word that he gave me was mortality, and I kind of freaked out and thought, well, where does this mortality bit go? And he says, well, close to being slotted in before the athletes come out with their flags, and I thought that was kind of a very risky option because they come out very proud as gladiators, really, and suddenly just before that we're reminding everyone of mortality. And he says that's the exact reason why I'm doing it, is because we all come from the earth and we'll all return back to the earth or into space, and but in the end, we have to remind ourselves, no matter how much of a gladiator we feel or how powerful we feel, we live and we die. And so mortality is, just to have the word mortality to play around with and create something on that is a great sense of liberation, because there wasn't that many rules that he gave me. The only thing that he said is you either do it with a large number of group or you do it alone. So I thought I'm going to do it with a large number of groups. So the largest that we collected was 50 very trained, highly trained dancers. And then he suggested a song with his music director, and it was a hymn. Really, it was which was sung by this wonderful singer, and so there was something that I think Danny recognized in my work, and that I was always not obsessed, but I was fascinated by, was the idea of spirituality. And so there was something spiritual when we were expressing patterns of mortality, what that in an abstract way, and you had the hymn, which was very sung in a very spiritual way. That clash or that connection, that kind of coming together was made it very sacred. And also what came before the showing with the photographs, the images of the people who had passed away. And it was, I think the most significant moment for me was just before we actually started the piece. To have almost 80,000 people go to silence was the loudest thing I've ever heard.
So when you dance, is it a spiritual experience for you? Do you feel closer to God when you're dancing?
No, I think it's spiritual, but it's not related to God necessarily. It's there's something that time is suspended. Just before I go on stage, every second is counting down, and that's man-made time. That's the clock time. That's the masculine time. That's the Christianized time. That's the westernized time. That's the industrial time. Then when I'm on stage, there's something that is Eastern time. The second I step onto stage, time becomes suspended. It becomes cyclical, and it's the vertical time, because the horizontal time is the man-made time. The vertical time is the spiritual time. So there's something spiritual about the time that you're on stage, because it becomes very heightened and sacred, but it also becomes elongated and it becomes expanded, and each second could feel like it lasts years, and at the same time each second can feel like it lasts a millisecond, or each hour can feel like it just went like that. So time becomes distorted somehow on stage.
Are you a religious man?
Not at all. I wouldn't say I am, no, not at all. I would say I'm very inclined to spirituality.
The reason why I ask is you studied the Kathak form of, if I've pronounced it properly, of Indian classical dance, and of course started off as a religious dance in temples, and then was moved into the Mughal courts of India.
Yeah. I think my mother put me into that dance form because of my guru, my master. She was just spellbound by his sense of what my master was wonderful at. His extraordinary gift was the performance quality. He was a real showman. He was, in a sense, the equivalent to Michael Jackson. He knew how to pull people in, whether it was classical or whether it was pop. It didn't matter about the form, and his master was even more of a genius. My grandmaster, let's say. So I think that's the reason why my mother put me into it. I mean, apart from it having Islamic and also Hindu kind of attachments to it, it wasn't predominantly for that reason.
Could you take us through some of the other big ideas that you've worked on? Lest We Forget portion that you choreographed, Dust.
Yeah.
Could you talk about that?
Yes. Again, it's life and death. Those are the big ideas. There is no bigger idea and mystery than death and life. That miracle happened twice for me when I was there at the birth of both my children. It's a seminal shift in your awareness of what life means, and the miracle of life, and death too, and the mystery of death is seminal as well. So Dust was really the originated from Tamara Rojo, who's the artistic director of ENB, and she proposed it to all the choreographers who were creating, and I was fascinated by the women particularly because of their, and it's somehow it's funnily continuing in that kind of direction with Until the Lions is my first feminist piece from a female perspective, and now Giselle. So
yes.
There's something about a kind of focusing on women's roles that I'm fascinated by. But I with Dust specifically, there was something about when women had suddenly their roles changed from being housewives to working in factories, because up till that point, mass women were unheard of working in factories.
So in a sense, the World War I led to the empowerment of women, yes.
Yes, exactly. But also the loss of men and women, but particularly men, for mothers, daughters, wives. That also was part of the work.
So you've worked on the choreography and the dance of a lot of these performances that were, as far as the story was concerned, very much female-led. You were, at the beginning of the year, criticised, I believe, by the arts journalists of The Observer for saying that we shouldn't just have more women choreographers for the sake of just having more women choreographers, presumably because that's patronising. We should just have a situation in which, of course, they're not discriminated against, but they shouldn't be employed just because they're women.
Yeah, I don't think men choreographers should be employed just because they're men. I don't think South Asian choreographers like myself should be employed just because I'm brown. Since South Asian is another word for brown, basically. And I don't know. I've always had to deal with the backlash of tokenism, and that's what I explained in the article that I wrote after. So I think in that respect, I really feel that there is a problem of lack of women choreographers, but that's also said in the article, but that's not really what they picked up on. And I said it's very deeply rooted, and I know of it because of my own mother, who was such a strong feminist, and her issues that she had, not just in society in Bangladesh, but in England too. And she had multiple issues, about being a woman, being from Bangladesh. There were multiple issues that she had. So I was very aware of that. So, but I was maybe I should be more specific. But then again, it's also bad journalism.
You're talking from Trafalgar Square, I believe.
Yeah.
The set for the next day or so of the big dance. Could you tell us about the big dance and your role as part of this enormous dance event?
Yeah, it was a real challenge because I've never made a vocabulary that was made for non-trained dancers, and it had to. I wanted, big dance is extraordinary because it's about involving everyone. In all societies, all cultures, all ages, and that was a real challenge for me. But it was also very revealing process, and I learned so much. It shifted my way of thinking, and it shifted the choreography also. To choose very carefully, and also something that will speak to people. It's not a piece that is kind of. Has a thumping beat, and it's not one of those works. I really felt that I wanted to awaken the five senses. That's really what it's about, and to go back to the body again, and to celebrate going back to the body with other people. There is a sense of coming together in a time, especially horrifically enough, in a time where we are separating politically and in many other ways from Europe. It's really, really important to come together to express the connection to the body.
So how will this event unfold? How is this event unfolding in reality?
Fine. I mean, I'm just watching it unfold. I'm not really involved. What's wonderful is that I went and watched one of the rehearsals on a field in Chiswick, and that was really exciting. And it's very... I get quite emotional when I see also the kind of pledge that people have done all over the world. It's really extraordinary. And it's your work, and you've never met them, but you planted a seed, and then suddenly they're creating their version of it, or they're doing it in the rooftop in Hong Kong, or they're doing it, it's just that reach is of your choreography. It makes me feel very humble, really.
What will actually happen tomorrow?
Well, we're going to have one rehearsal and then two showings, really, for people, public, and also for invited guests. But it's not it's not about the guests. It's really about the people who are dancing. It's about their connection to each other. It's about celebration, and it's more about them than it is about. It's not like a theatre audience where they pay a ticket to come and see a show. So really, you are sharing something to them with them. It's really whether there's nobody or everybody, we're going to do it. Whether it rains, but hopefully we get to do it because it's so important to show unity.
You mentioned a few minutes ago that it makes you feel quite emotional. Thinking of all your past performances and all your choreography, which piece of work made you feel as if you reached out and touched people in a way that was most powerful?
Well, I hope all of them do. But I think particularly, for me personally, it's, of course I'm biased, but it's usually my autobiography, really. The most autobiographical works, semi-autobiographical works, one of them being 0 Degrees, the other one being Dish.
And could you explain why?
As I said, it's because it's so personal to me. They're stories I've lived. Then, just hold on a sec, I've got a quote that I saw recently.
Okay, fantastic.
That could be of value. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so there's a quote that I just wrote down, and it was beautifully said, where is it? It's okay. It says artist. It's a person called Alan Moore, and he said artists use lies to tell the truth.
Oh.
And then he says, yes, I created a lie, but because you believe it, you found something true about yourself. And I think that's kind of, I partly agree with that. I tell part truth, part fantasy. But it's about revealing the truth in the end, in the audience, them finding their own truth, because art has a great way has another dimension, another perspective of what's happening in the world. And you receive it differently. You experience it differently to a politician telling you what's the state of the world, or to your own personal experience. And that's the power of art.
Who has touched you most in your life?
I would say my mother. Yeah. She's a prolific person in my life. She's always inspired me, always challenged me, always pushed me, and guided me in a way that was, I'm a very difficult child. I was a very difficult child to guide. I was uncontrollable most of my childhood. So the only time I was still was when I danced. That's the funny thing. I found a stillness and a calmness in me when I was dancing. Apart from that, I'm just like a bloody rocket, really. I could never be still, never be focused. Words would start to blur, letters would start to blur. I had issues with sitting down from the table. But my mother was a huge inspiration. And love was her, she really, all her stories were about love.
Have you seen the Ken Robinson TED Talk?
About education?
Yes.
And creativity?
Yes.
It's a genius piece of talk.
When he talks about the
Yes.
mother who takes her daughter to the doctor and says, I don't know what to do about my daughter. She just won't sit still. What do I do? And the doctor turned round and said, there's nothing wrong with your daughter. She's a dancer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I'm not sure of the name of the dancer, but I wondered whether you knew the name, and if so, whether you ever met that dancer.
No, not at all. No, but I'd love to meet Ken Robinson. I think he's an extraordinary human being.
Well, let's see what we can do with this interview. Would he be the person that you would want to meet? If there was one person.
I'd love to meet him. I'd love to have a conversation with him about how he sees things. I'm fascinated by. That's why I love to meet artists, because I'm fascinated by their view of the world, their view on things, because they always have a tangent. They always have an obscure or different way to look at things rather than the way other people look at it. There's something you can learn from that, and I love listening to, just having conversations with artists or listening to them talk.
Looking back on some of the artists that you've worked with, from Juliette Binoche right the way through to Anish Kapoor, can you choose any of them that really changed your perspective in the most fundamental way? Did any of them surprise you, where you thought, my goodness, I never thought of it that way?
I think they all surprised me, but I think the one that fundamentally changed and inspired me was my producer, Farooq Chaudhry.
Oh, really?
Yeah, our relationship was very special, and I think he changed me as much as I changed him.
Could you tell us how you met?
Yeah, he came to... Jonathan Burrows is a choreographer, British choreographer, who took me under his wings for a while and was kind of mentoring me in a kind of unofficial way. He was mentoring me. And so he spoke about Farooq as this new manager, and you must meet him because he's fascinated by dance, and his sister used to dance, and told me the history. And then he came and saw me perform. Farooq came and saw me perform with Jonathan at South Bank, and actually Alistair Spalding was the artistic director at South Bank then. And it was quite extraordinary meeting him. I remember he was very fiery, very hungry, and so he then came and saw me do a solo, because he didn't know if I could choreograph, because in the end Jonathan really was the choreographer of that duet. So he came and saw a solo I did, and that's where we embraced each other. It was, I can't remember when, 1998 maybe.
And of course he's an ex-dancer, isn't he?
Yes, he is, yeah.
So how did things work then? You met, and there was this enormous spark. You got on well. What happened next?
There was a dialogue. Well, first of all, I spoke about my ambitions, and he said, "Well, let's see how we can set up the structure to achieve them, and we will take simple steps. We won't skip a step, because arriving at the goal is what you want to aim for is not what it's about. It's about the journey, and that's equally as important as arriving. Because once you've arrived, that's the end. So hopefully you never arrive. Really, that's the key to it. Really, I would say. But the key is really the journey of it. And so he was the creative side for the business, for the structure of the company. I was the creative side for the work. But we shared dialogue artistically, and we had a really strong relationship, an important relationship for both of us. It was seminal for us because it changed. We achieved what we achieved, whatever little or big we achieved, because of the both of us being in each other's journey.
So you both founded the Akram Khan company.
Yeah.
And also both work with the English National Ballet.
Yeah.
The next production that's coming up is Giselle. I know there are limitations on what you can talk about. There's a little bit on the English National Ballet site about the creative process. Could you tell us a little bit about the creative process that you're going through?
Yeah, it's really exciting. There is a patronage, I feel, and rightly so, with Giselle. And that's frightening to carry with you, for me, because you are interrupting something holy, in a sense. And so I want to be very respectful of that. But I also want to explore the way how I see Giselle and the narrative. For me, it's fundamentally about love, betrayal, and forgiveness. And again, from a women's, I want to kind of reveal it from Giselle's perspective. So the process is fascinating. I love working with English National Ballet because they're an extraordinary company, full of hunger, full of possibilities, unlike any other ballet company. They are, and they're lightweight. They're not like the Royal Ballet or the Paris Opera, because they are bigger in terms of numbers, and it's an institute. English National Ballet has the added possibility of being lightweight, in the sense that it's a very contained team, and I choose to work with a ballet company if I feel that I truly believe in the artistic director and their vision, whoever that may be, and I really, really believe in Tamara and her commitment to my process.
She says on the website how much she's looking forward to your interpretation.
Yeah, that's frightening though. There's a lot of expectation. She's putting a lot of weight on me. No, I'm terrified actually. I was just telling my wife how terrified I am. I've never been as terrified. And the older I get, the more I make work, the more calmer I should get, but actually the more terrified I become. Once I'm in the studio, I'm okay. It's just leading up to it, because we've had a bit of a break. So I've been working with these wonderful research dancers that ENB has hired, which are not the dancers who will be on stage doing Giselle, but they've been dancers that I could work with while ENB dancers are working on performing other projects. And so it was really great to have that opportunity to work with research dancers before I actually get into working with the main dancers, or the dancers who will eventually perform Giselle. So it's exciting.
Are you allowed to talk about the dancers who are going to be taking part in the performance?
Not really, because we haven't clarified that yet. Yeah, it's still and even if we had, I wouldn't be able to say. But we haven't got to there yet. We've got a scenography. We've got a set, and we've got costumes designed. We're kind of creating the world which are around, and then the stories will find its way, will emerge out of that world. But even though the story is existing and has been reinterpreted many times, the most frighteningly amazing one, masterpiece, I would say, is Matt Seck's one, Giselle. It's just extraordinary, and so that's always frightening me, that version.
What presumably is very exciting for you is the sort of mystical element of the story for your interpretation.
It's funny you said that, because I never understood why. Tamara's was not the only person who approached me to do Giselle with their ballet company, and I kept wondering, why is everybody asking me to do Giselle? Not everyone, but why are these artistic directors asking me to do Giselle? And I couldn't understand it. And I remember, a company, the artistic director said, it's because there's something mystical and spiritual about the second half. And then I understood the connection one, and I saw the version that they showed me, and then I saw English National Ballet. There is something spiritual about the second half. That is, I mean, really, the second half is what Giselle is about. The first half is preparing the groundwork for the second act. That's the way I see it.
Premiere's going to be in Manchester, September.
Yeah. Remind me.
And then it's shown. It's going to be shown in London in November.
I think so. Yeah, sadly as well. Yeah.
Are you a mentor to anybody? Any dancers?
I'm a mentor to my children, but they don't seem to listen to me. I'm a shit mentor right now. I'm just not. I thought I'd be really natural at it, but I'm really struggling, especially with my boy who's 1.5, who completely. Everything I say, he does the exact opposite. Everything that I'm saying to be safe, he just goes for it and does it, and it's just frightening and terrifying. My daughter is more. She has this absurdity, which is extraordinary. She's very artistic, so I think there's a connection between her and me. She's 3. Perhaps age is something that plays a part in it. But I mentored initially a young dancer called Akash Detra, who's this very talented young dancer, a very special human being. And I've mentored on and off some other artists, but again, unofficially. I don't. There's a lot of male and female choreographers that I mentor unofficially and support them in any way I can.
Do you only work with trained dancers, or have you ever had the situation where you have sensed that somebody could be a dancer and then worked with them?
Yes, that's been the case. There's been situations. I've worked a lot with actors.
Juliette Binoche was one.
Yes, but that was very specific. I mean, but I've worked with other actors in a group where you look at someone and go, well, they're really natural. Their movement is really natural. There's something very unique, special about them, and they're very connected with their body, and they express themselves very easily and effortlessly. But mostly I work with extremely highly trained dancers.
I read in one of the articles about you that you have the ability to read people very easily, to understand who they are and what they are in their essence.
To be honest with you, I have to be more specific about that. I should have been more specific if I said that, because I can read people very much better and very quickly when they're in the studio with me. Outside the studio, when you meet people, there is a meeting face and a meeting personality that one has. There is also the person. There is a child character that one puts on. That you're always your son to your mother. You're always a daughter to your mother or father, and that's a very specific kind of character, personality, side of your personality. But when they're in the studio, there's something that's stripped away, and you have the possibility of ambiguity. And in that ambiguity, you don't know which role to put on. And so, in a sense, you're naked as a character and as a person. And that's when I really understand people.
What makes you laugh?
My children. I take myself sometimes too seriously, and they remind me how unimportant and unserious I am. They don't really give. They don't care. And that's really extraordinary. But also Charlie Chaplin makes me laugh a lot.
Really?
He used to make me laugh a lot. Also Lauren Hardy, Betty Izzard, in my own work. And I don't want to avoid it anymore. But I don't know if we will, in the end, have that. But it's something that I would like to explore for sure. And the older I get, as I said, my children, since the birth of my children, humour has become a very important part of my life.
Music is very important in your performances, and not just music, the sounds sometimes that the dancers make. Could you talk to me about the type of musicians and composers you like to work with, and also the sounds in the performances?
It depends on the project, and it depends on the state of my life, where I am. There was a possibility to work with, at one point, Ennio Morricone, and I've always, I love his music, but that didn't happen. But I'm really looking forward to working with Tigran, who is a wonderful composer and musician. I loved working with Nitin Soni, but he did the big dance also. His music. He's a very dear friend of mine. I'm an extraordinary artist. I loved working with Jocelyn Ploug, Ben Frost. Ben Frost is working with us on Giselle. There's so many composers, and Max Richter, who I've never worked with, but trying to work with for years, but we can never make it work with our timetable. There's so many artists, and music is seminal, of utmost importance to my to movement, because that's the first thing that I've always that's the first thing and most important thing that I've always felt connected to, and reason why I dance. The music creates the environment for why I dance.
You mentioned earlier that you'd love to meet Ken Robinson. During the course of your work and your travels, you meet and work with a lot of famous people. Is there anybody else that you would love to meet?
There's so many. I'd love to meet Bruno Ganz. I would love to, the wonderful actor. I'd love to meet Tilda Swinton. I think she's extraordinary as an actress. There's so many directors I would like to meet, like Iñárritu, who directed Babel. He did 21 Grams. He did Birdman. And Leah I've met, who I think is wonderful, and who, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, many other films, Brokeback Mountain. Pedro Almodovar, and there's so many Japanese film directors that I'd love to meet, and Korean film directors, and Asian film directors generally. I have a whole list of people I'd love to meet. Mostly directors, because that's kind of somehow the place I feel most at home with at this stage of my life.
Your work reaches out and touches people in a way, having been a member of your audience myself, in a way that is very special, very, very mystical. It's an unusual experience. Is there one last thing, just as part of this interview, you would like to say to your audience, a message to them?
Stillness and silence is very important. We're moving too quickly. I think there's too much noise around us. And the only way you can absorb what's happening around you is to be still and silent.
Akram Khan, co-founder of the Akram Khan Company, world-famous choreographer and dancer, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And good luck for tomorrow.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So much. The best.